As a college student in general, the cost of college is very near and dear to my heart and my wallet. So during my junior and senior year of high school, as I looked at potential colleges, I thought about the cost. I had read the articles, heard the stories enough times to know that college was expensive, specifically referring to tuition and fees. But somewhere in the midst of all of this talk around tuition unaffordability, everyone forgot to talk about housing. And I couldn't figure out why no one talked about it because my bill for college doubled when I factored in housing. But when I couldn't find anything on housing, I thought this might just be something students dealt with, and I paid the bill anyways. So after way too many iced coffees and long, unproductive study trips to the library, I realized that I wasn't the only one talking about housing because the spring bill came out. All around me, my peers were talking about the price of housing on campus. And as off-campus complexes kicked up their fall leasing campaigns, I realized this conversation extended past our residence halls. With new luxury individual leasing complexes popping up around universities around the country, taking out all of the single-family rentals, the price to live off-campus is drastically changing. And these changes both on and off campuses aren't just creating annoyances for our students, these changes are causing serious affordability concerns. But yet no one seems to care. No one seemed to care that students can't afford their rent, are sacrificing meals to scrape by, having to take out more and more loans to cover the rising costs, or hitting pause on their education entirely due to the cost burden. And I realized that the problem was rooted in how we were talking about student housing. Because if I tell you of a person who says, I can't afford my rent right now, you would probably say that's a problem. But if I told you that same person was a 20-year-old college student, you would probably say, they're in college. And that is the problem. We as a society have normalized college broke to such a level we are unable to see the harmful ways that this cost burden is manifesting itself. Because when we unpack how this college broke shows up into these discussions, they completely change. The casual, I can't afford my rent, or I'm eating ramen for the third time this week, or I'm staying with a friend, or even I'm gonna transfer in later, changes to I'm housing insecure, I'm food insecure, I'm homeless, I've been priced out of an education. Let's stop normalizing college broke and let's start to critically analyze the student housing market just like we do regular housing markets. Still need another reason why we should? The cost of tuition and fees has doubled since the 1970s. And since 2000 alone, the cost has increased by 66%. This change has caused national conversations and policies. On the other hand, student housing has increased by 145% since 1970 and 58% since 2000 alone. And while tuition and fees vary drastically between public and private institutions, housing costs do not. And accounting for a third of the average cost of college in America, student housing has consistently proven itself as a critical point in any college affordability plan. And yet, there are no national conversations or policies around it. You need another reason? You should care because 1 in 3 of 4-year college students experience housing insecurity. Because half of 2-year college students do. Because 1 in 6 of college students will face homelessness. Because millions of students are or have faced this issue. Because one of those students is talking to you now. Because COVID-19 is drastically exacerbating this crisis. When universities shut down and switched to online classes, residence halls largely closed and students were forced to leave. And for those students where home wasn't an option, homelessness and housing insecurity occurred. Combined with the delay in issuing refunds, students were put in a difficult financial position. Yet, on a positive, on-campus students had their voices heard by the national media. Our off-campus students weren't so lucky. Even while students left closed campuses, students who lived off campus still had leases that couldn't be broken just because they didn't have to go to their university anymore. And so when April 1st rolled around, rent was due, and due again in May, and in June, and in July. And with most college students not receiving a stimulus check due to their dependent status for financial aid and losing their jobs or internships due to the shutdown, students' cost burden changed, and for some, it even became unbearable. And now, here we are, nearly 6 months into the pandemic, back on our campuses, paying for housing that could be closed at a moment's notice with no hopes for refunds and off-campus leases that go to July 2021. Our students are not only living through a global pandemic and an economic recession, but a new complicated housing crisis rooted in the original in all of its ignored glory. We saw it before and we see it blatantly now. College housing affordability is a very real problem across this nation at every style of institution. It's not just about cost either. It affects students' academic success, well-being, long-term financial health, and almost more importantly, the cost of student housing can limit a student's ability to attain a degree at all. Because the reality is, I am 4 hours away from my hometown. Without being able to afford the cost of housing at this institution, I would not be where I am today, and this stage would be empty. The cost of college housing is tied directly to the educational attainability of our students. So then the question is, what do we do from here? Step 1, you acknowledge it. Let's stop leaving college housing out of our larger discussions around college affordability. Step 2, take your college broke and throw it away. Let's stop normalizing poverty for college students and let's begin to critically interrogate the language we use and the assumptions we make around college economics, especially related to housing. Because the way we think about it right now isn't cutting it. Step 3, demand more. Demand more information, more research, more discussion, more resources, and more action. This issue isn't going to be solved without asking for more. Other than that, I don't know what we do or where to go from here. No one does. But I know one thing for certain. Students like me and those students coming behind us to America's institutions cannot wait for this to become another trendy political moment on Instagram. We need this conversation and we need action now more than ever. Thank you.